All right, get ready for a deep dive. One that might just make you rethink, well, everything you thought you knew.
Sounds intense.
It is. We're talking about a link between two conditions
Yeah.
that, on the surface, seem totally unrelated.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
Autism spectrum disorder, or ASD for short,
Yeah.
and multiple sclerosis, MS.
ASD and MS. Not the most obvious pairing. I see where that rethink everything part comes in.
Right. ASD is usually diagnosed in childhood,
Mm.
and it impacts things like social interaction and communication.
Yeah.
And then you've got MS. It's a
Rachel.
neurological condition.
Right, where your immune system attacks the protective covering of nerves.
Exactly. And it's usually diagnosed way later in life.
So you'd think they'd be worlds apart, these two conditions.
You would. But there's this article, Autism and Multiple Sclerosis, a little-known connection.
Okay.
And it suggests there's more to the story. Way more. Get this. People with autism might have a tenfold increased risk of developing MS.
Whoa. Tenfold. That's a lot.
Right. It's mind-blowing.
It is a head-scratcher at first. I mean, you look at how differently they present.
Totally.
They affect different systems in the body. So for a long time, there was just zero reason to think they were connected. But now
Now the research is saying something else.
it is. What's really fascinating is that recent research is starting to point to some underlying mechanisms that they might actually share.
Okay, my deep dive brain is officially hooked. Break this down for me. You mentioned studies suggesting a higher risk of MS for people with autism. Can you walk me through some of that research?
Absolutely. There was this one study, and it really made waves in the scientific community because it found that people with autism could have, get this, as much as a tenfold greater risk of developing MS compared to the general population.
Tenfold. Again with the tenfold. That's like a huge EE number.
It is significant, but it's important to note that this doesn't mean that every single person with autism will develop MS.
Right. Right. Of course not.
It just means there's a strong statistical link there, one that definitely needs more research.
For sure. It makes you wonder what's happening behind the scenes. What's the WHY here? What are some of the potential explanations researchers are exploring?
Well, one of the big ones is genetics. Both ASD and MS have really strong genetic components, meaning certain genes could make a person more susceptible to both conditions.
Ah, I see.
You don't need to get into the weeds of specific genes.
Yeah, no need to get too technical.
But think of it this way. There's a lot of overlap in the genetic blueprints of these two conditions.
So our genes could be playing a role.
Yeah.
What else are researchers looking at?
Another biggie is inflammation. Chronic inflammation. Think of it this way. It's like this low-grade fire that's just constantly smoldering in your body. And it's actually present in both ASD and MS. And this kind of inflammation can cause real damage over time. Like imagine metal rusting slowly.
Oof, not a good visual.
Not good for your body either.
That's a powerful analogy. It really paints a picture. Are there other things on the list? Other suspects?
Yeah, oxidative stress is another one. It's basically an imbalance in the body. Like think of an apple turning brown. That's oxidation.
Okay.
And this process, it can damage cells, and it might be contributing to both ASD and MS.
So we've got genes, inflammation, and this oxidative stress, all potentially tied up in this complex web. Anything else researchers are considering?
There's one more, and this one's really fascinating. The gut-brain axis.
Oh, the gut-brain connection. Always love hearing about that.
Right. It's a hot topic for a reason. Basically, the health of our gut can have a much bigger impact on our brains than we used to think.
It's wild.
Researchers are even finding that changes in the gut microbiome, you know, the community of microorganisms that live in your gut,
Yeah.
those changes might play a role in both ASD and MS.
Wait, so you're telling me that the bacteria in my gut could actually influence my risk of developing MS?
It's looking more and more likely. The gut-brain axis is turning out to be a key player in all sorts of neurological and developmental conditions. And this research suggests it's a significant factor in the connection between ASD and MS.
Wow. Okay, so we've got these four potential links. Genes, inflammation, oxidative stress, and the gut-brain connection. But what does this mean for, like, someone listening to this right now? How does this research actually impact people's lives?
That's the big question, isn't it? And the good news is this research is already changing how doctors are approaching both conditions.
Really? How so? Tell me more.
Well, for starters, it's highlighting the importance of screening. Like, if someone is diagnosed with MS, doctors are starting to think about screening for autism, and vice versa. Catching things early could be key.
Early diagnosis and intervention. Always a good thing.
Exactly. And then, looking ahead, there's the potential for shared treatments. If we can really pinpoint the common mechanisms driving these conditions, then we could develop treatments that benefit folks with both ASD and DMS.
Okay, now we're talking.
Right, whether it's addressing inflammation or managing oxidative stress or even influencing the gut-brain axis, the possibilities are pretty exciting.
It's incredible to think about how understanding this unexpected connection could lead to breakthroughs in how we treat both conditions.
It is pretty amazing. Back again for more on this autism and MS connection.
Back for more.
Ugh.
It's amazing to think that just a few years ago, this link wasn't really even on anyone's radar.
Right, and now we're seeing all this research exploring these shared pathways. It's incredible.
It really shows you the power of scientific curiosity and collaboration. When researchers connect the dots between seemingly unrelated conditions, who knows what we can discover?
Absolutely. And this isn't just about like statistics and scientific papers.
Right.
This research has real-world implications for people living with these conditions
Okay.
and their families.
Exactly. Imagine if we could pinpoint who's at a higher risk for either condition early on.
Oh, yeah.
Early intervention could change everything.
For sure. And speaking of interventions, one area that's really interesting to me is the gut-brain connection. We talked about how those changes in the gut microbiome might be playing a role in both ASD and MS. Think we'll see treatments that target the gut to help manage these conditions.
It's definitely a possibility.
Mm.
I mean, we already know that what we eat can impact our gut health.
Right.
And there's more and more evidence that things like probiotics and prebiotics could be really helpful.
Yeah, there's even research being done on fecal microbiota transplants, although I know that's not the most appealing topic.
Uh-huh. Yeah, maybe not dinner conversation material.
Right.
But all jokes aside, it is pretty amazing to think about how the bacteria in our gut could have such a big effect on our brains.
It really does highlight how interconnected our bodies are in ways that we're only just beginning to understand.
For sure. It really underscores that need for a holistic approach to health.
Totally.
Like what we eat, how we live, and even those microorganisms sharing our bodies. It all plays a role. Okay, so much to think about here. What stands out to you as the most surprising part of this connection between ASD and MS?
I think for me, it's the potential for new treatment strategies. Ones that could help with both conditions. Like if inflammation is really a driving force, as the research suggests, then maybe anti-inflammatory meds or therapies could be beneficial for people with both ASD and MS.
So by understanding these shared mechanisms, we could potentially treat two different conditions using similar approaches.
That's the idea. And that's why continuing research in this area is so important. The more we learn, the closer we get to developing more effective treatments.
And it's not just medication, is it? This could lead to new behavioral therapies
No, definitely.
or lifestyle interventions, ones tailored to the specific challenges faced by individuals with both conditions.
Absolutely right. It's about looking at the whole person and what they need.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Talk about the future. Where do we go from here? What's next on the research agenda?
Well, genetics is a big one. Researchers are really digging deep, trying to pinpoint the specific genes that might be contributing to both ASD and MS.
So we could see more accurate risk assessments and even personalized treatments based on your gene.
Exactly. That's the hope.
Yeah.
The immune system. Both ASD and MS involve some kind of dysregulation of the immune system, although in different ways. So researchers are working to understand these immune system abnormalities better,
I see.
to figure out how to modulate them or even correct them. Imagine retraining the immune system so it doesn't attack the body's own tissues anymore.
Now, that would be incredible. Any other research areas you're particularly excited about?
The gut-brain connection, for sure. That's a really hot area of research. Scientists are working to map out how exactly the gut microbiome interacts with the immune system and the nervous system,
Okay.
and how those interactions might contribute to both conditions. This research could lead to new dietary interventions, or even probiotic treatments.
So the future of treatment for both ASD and MS could involve a healthy dose of gut-friendly bacteria. I like the sound of that.
I think we're all starting to realize that a healthy gut is crucial for, well, everything. And this research is backing that up.
It really is amazing to think that we could be on the verge of some major breakthroughs.
It is. The research is moving fast. And I'm really optimistic that we'll see some incredible progress in the years to come.
I agree. This has been such a fascinating conversation. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of this connection between ASD and MS. But before we get even deeper, let's take a moment to process all this. When we come back, we'll wrap up our deep dive with some final thoughts. So stay tuned. All right, we're back. Ready to wrap up our exploration of this surprising link between autism and MS?
Absolutely. It's been quite the journey.
It really has. So where were we? Ah, yes. We
Yes.
uncovered so much, starting with that initial shock of, wow, there's a connection here, and then delving into the potential for treatments, ones that target inflammation, oxidative stress, even the gut-brain axis.
And it really shows you how complex these conditions are and how much more there is to discover about this link between them.
For sure. Okay, quick recap for our listeners. Remember that finding about individuals with autism may be having a tenfold increased risk of developing MS. Pretty wild.
Yeah, that number really makes you stop and think.
Totally. And then we dug into the possible explanations for this connection, focusing on those four key areas: genetics, inflammation, oxidative stress, and that fascinating gut-brain connection.
And each of those areas is like a launch pad for new research. It's pretty exciting.
Right, we could see new diagnostic tools, new treatments, maybe even preventive strategies for both conditions.
Exactly. And we can't forget about screening, especially for folks with a family history of either ASD or MS cyst. Early diagnosis and intervention can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. The earlier we can catch these conditions, the better the chances of improving someone's quality of life.
Couldn't agree more. I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. We've talked about the potential for shared treatments, but what if this connection goes even deeper than that? Could understanding this link actually lead to breakthroughs that help us treat both autism and DMS in the future?
That's the dream, isn't it? And honestly, what we've learned today, it gives us reason to be optimistic. Because if we can understand the mechanisms at play here, those shared mechanisms, well, who knows what kind of treatment strategies we might be able to unlock. Ones that benefit people across the spectrum of both ASD and MS.
It's incredible to think about. What started as this surprising connection could end up shaping a brighter future for so many people. It really speaks to the power of science, to uncover hidden connections and reveal possibilities we never even imagined.
Well said. This deep dive has definitely been eye-opening, for me anyway. It's amazing to see the potential that lies in understanding these complex relationships between conditions that seem, at first glance, totally unrelated.
Right. It reminds us to stay curious, to keep asking questions. There's still so much out there to discover.
So true. And with that, deep divers, we've reached the end of our exploration for today. We hope you enjoyed this journey into the world of autism and MS. Keep those brains curious and stay tuned for more unexpected connections.